in the ocean circulation and the human activities that change the atmosphere's makeup. For example, burning fossils, fuels, um, and the land surfaces, cutting down forests, plantation of deplantation of trees, building developments in the cities, suburbs, radiations, etc. And the next one, I want to tell you what are the impacts and the impacts of uh, next one, please. It is well understood, perhaps, that the mental human health is threatened by the impacts of the climate change. While I was searching the literature and I found out a very nice overview, research article in 2017, Lancet Countdown. It is very famous on climate changes, and the author states, and I quote, that human symptoms of climate changes are unequivocally and potentially irreversible, affecting the health of populations around the world today. Next. Then going further, next slide, we find out World Health Organization estimates an increase of 250,000 estimated excess deaths per year between 2030 and 2050 due to the well understood impact of climate change. Then further impact, we go on next slide. We found that there is, based on our 10 years systemic analysis, systemic analysis of global burden of disease by Professor Murray, not Robin Murray, but Christopher Murray. And they found out that mental illness comprises 7.8% of the global burden of diseases. And when you add mental and behavior disorders, which also account for the global burden of years, that the years lost due to disability, probably this becomes more, but exact figures are not now available at present. So since 2000, the frequency of climate change related weather disasters are increased by 46%. Now we see that this is quite a huge number. We continue, and we found out that first of all, we should define for the purpose of climate change, what is mental health? A little different. Mental health refers not just to mental illness, mental problems and mental disorders, but also includes states of mental wellness, emotional resilience, and psychosocial well-being. So the psychosocial well-being, psychosocial illness, psychosocial mental disability, they will be related to the eco anxiety, eco sciences, and eco psychology, eco psychiatry. The psychosocial well-being is the interplay between the social and psychological conditions that shape human welfare, a broad term which includes the states of being mentally healthy, experiencing mental problems, and mental illness. We further go on and we find what are the mental health changes. It could be direct. The research has shown that there is a causal relationship between heat and violence, and that rising global temperature may be followed by an increase in incidence of violent aggression, as may be seen in increasing rates of assault, rape, robbery, and burglary. Now, I just give you another domestic violence. And initially, when I gave you some description of my motivation for the climate change and mental health, my memories take me back to 35 years ago when I had a driver from Chatral and he was doing very well. And then one day, all of a sudden, he showed anger but he didn't have any previous history of bipolar or depression, etc. And that was the first summer which he was with us, and that summer was also there were no rains. We suddenly took, he used to drive my Jeep. He came out of the Jeep under slight provocation of the mm, uh, traffic policeman. He held him from his neck and then thrown him down, and he was very violent. It was very, very challenging for me. And then, later on, we changed him and kept him in an AC room, etc. He was well enough. He went to Chitral for some time. Later on, it was okay. Although those conditions did not meet uh, the full criteria of climate change, which should persist over a period of time and it should be irreversible. But still, that gave me an idea that, okay, we have to consider those things in our mind till we are today. And then we continue to find out that the incremental climate changes we find such as rising temperature, rising sea levels, and episodic drought. These changes can change natural landscapes. They can disrupt food. They can disrupt water resources. They can change agriculture conditions, and they can change land use and habitation. Moreover, these forces can weaken the infrastructure and give rise to financial and relationship stress, increase risk of violence and aggression, and displacement of entire communities. We have been witnessing the displacement of Afghan communities due to the Afghan war, and we found out that how this thing was happening. The mental health, describing more about mental health, we now come to the indirect effects. Well, the indirect impacts of mental health. I searched the literature and we found out that uh, the climate changes in mental health includes increasing evidence that extreme weather conditions, which are more frequent, intense, and complex under a changing climate, can trigger PTSD type of illnesses or behaviors or symptoms, and also major depressive disorder. This is very true. Anxiety, depression, complicated grief, survival guilt, indirect trauma, recovery fatigue, etc. Now we see that recovery fatigue we also see as post-COVID phenomena, those who suffer from substance abuse and suicidal ideation. So the suicidal behaviors may be caused by increasing climate-related uncertainty. I repeat, climate-related uncertainty. This I intentionally use this word, and this was very much this account seems to be very much uh, experientially valid when we look up the Chitral condition, and we also look at some of the Indian study that the phenomena of farmers we find in India, they attempted or rather completed suicides in one uh, part of the era where there was continuous drought in Rajasthan and not in Haryana, in some other state which I don't remember. And it is very well documented, in a very interesting article by uh, Ms. Shukla, and she described this very nicely. And it's also been uh, reported anecdotally from Peru and Brazil. Now, if we again come to the next slide, marginalized groups, and by marginalized groups who are most affected by the mental and physical health implications of climate changes are indigenous people. Oh, you know it better than me, like in Australia, like in Canada, like United States. And also, I don't know children. Children probably are not marginalized, and women not in each and every culture. In those cultures who are rich, they are not marginalized, but in the culture, so, very poor countries they are. And also people with low socioeconomic status, the outdoor laborers, radicalized people, immigrants, and people with pre-existing health conditions. This is quite evident, and I think this is quite easy. Now, we also see, uh, I'm more interested in describing the adverse effects on the mental health of children. Very. It is feared that the future generations will react to climate changes, uh, information, and understanding with feeling of despair. Children are known to children are known to show much more severe distress after disasters than babies. But the children are especially prone to pre-disaster anxiety and post-traumatic illness. I repeat, for there was some disturbance, that the children are especially prone to pre-disaster anxiety and post-trauma illness, which may be either due to direct exposure to life-threatening circumstances and likely separation from family and community supports, are due to the reality of living with long-term threat. Moreover, in a survey of Australian children, very nice study, researchers noted that a quarter of children are so troubled about the state of the world that they honestly believe it will come to an end before they get older. These are some of these things I have witnessed some children saying while they come for some kind of treatment. I don't know what are the experiences of others. They are not due to climate change, but these kind of things, the attitude towards life. For this, there is a need to change the curriculum, which should include disaster preparedness as a necessary tool to be given in the hands of our children by educational system. Now, the thing is that I request at this juncture PPS uh, office bearers to also take up this subject, and they are very good, Imran and others, uh, Afridi Saab, to take up this matter particularly and see if we can do something, a pilot study to find out whether children can receive this information in a better way or not. Next. Now, crucially important to consider is the pre-existing mental health conditions or problems which can exacerbate or even trigger the changes in climate. So no need to explain that anymore. However, paradoxically, the opposite side, the use of survey methods to capture positive psychological consequences of extreme weather events. I have seen people like feelings of compassion, altruism, sense of meaning, post-traumatic growth, or even increased acceptance of climate change and engagement with uh, climate mitigation to have other alternatives for the climate. You know, uh, probably maybe I am a kind who is optimistic, and that's what we continued working in for the disaster mental health. Now, if we go to Pakistan, some information. The Global Climate Index, uh, Risk Index by German Watch on recently on 15th of this month, they uh, they told that Pakistan has fifth spot on the list of countries which are more vulnerable to climate changes. And according to this report, Pakistan lost nearly 10,000 lives, suffered from economic losses worth 3.8 billion dollars, and witnessed 152 extreme weather events from 1999 to 2018. And based on this data, the German think tank has concluded that Pakistan's vulnerability to climate change is increasing. That was a dawn news not very long ago. Now, if we go again to some other aspects in Pakistan studies, the Global Change Impact Studies Center of Pakistan shows that mean annual temperature has increased in the recent past, with the greater increase in Sindh and Balochistan. And the same kind of finding were replicated in a study by a Pakistani study in probably in Gujarat, well, somewhere in Punjab. I cannot open, which is Pakistan temperature rise by an author. They said that during the last century, the average temperature of Pakistan has increased by 0.6 degrees, which is in conformity with the increase of average global temperature. And then we go further up, next slide, we see UNDP, United Nations uh, Control Program. UNDP says that the effects of climate change also weigh disproportionately on the poor and on women and children. Successful climate change adaptation coupled with alternatives in unbearable circumstances, such as Chernobyl radiation disaster in Russia, holds the key to human development prospects. The Due to that radiation in Russia, the whole community is displaced and on a new place, and it holds very key importance for the environmentalist. Now, in Pakistan, we had floods 2010 and 11, very bad. Almost 10% of Pakistan's population was displaced in two provinces, one in north and other in south. Last year, the cost of extreme weather as a consequence of climate change was listed. It was based on few years ago, but it was reported last year about $384 million in the previous 20 years collectively. There has been a cost of almost $2 billion to the national economy. National economy suffered because of the ravages of climate change. Now, I just give you my own experience in the next slide, the Chatral experience, if you want. We had a free medical camp in Chatral. We were there for a few days, couple of 3-4 days. And in September 2018, yes, it is, we had enough evidence to share with you, although they are not taken in depth, but few patients were talked in depth. We found out that definitely floods and droughts, fires, loss of forest, glaciers, these all things happened in Chatral. Recently in Chatral floods, same month or a month ago probably, 25 days ago, there is a portion, there's a village, Rasham, uh, which is altogether abolished due to the climate change. And even the river bed took it away, and there are now no people who can abode, and there are no abides over there. Out of 150 patients we saw, we assessed in the psychiatric camp organized by us, 72 patients, amongst them 50 male patients and 22 females, were assessed and followed up in Peshawar, even admitted some of them, and we found out that their symptoms were related to climate change. Not everybody, but in reasonable number of patients. And somehow or other, we found that there were about 2%, 2 to 3% of people who were really, who admitted themselves that the weather changes are continuous and they are not well. One of the patient who almost attempted suicide few times and was later admitted with us in Peshawar. We found out that
इसको बोला मैंने इंटरनेट यहाँ से इस पे ज़्यादा मेहनत की और हो नहीं सका, इसको कनेक्ट नहीं हुआ मैं क्योंकि मैं
hello, can I continue? Because there was some disturbance. Now, there was another patient. So, I was just going to let them know that we had seen in depth two patients who we found out that there were enough reasons for them, main reason for them was the climate change and the upper Chatral areas, and also there was a landscape was changed, the villages were gone, and then even next year again there was a disaster of floods, and these two days up till now, and the rest of the things probably you other doctors might well be thinking. Uh, though this study, through this study, we observed that due to climate change, uh, there is low frustration tolerance. The frustration tolerance is low, mood fluctuations there, lack of energy, irritability, and anxious thoughts. If the climate changes persist and persist, as in some parts of the world, they carry on more and more. In the next slide, we see that in 2015, the World Health Organization. Now we go on how to take measures. What is the remedy? How to intervene? What is intervention? How to adapt? The World Health Organization uh, told us that how we can make building climate friendly resilience resilient health systems. Now, if we want to have resilient health systems, WHO recommends that the guidance of professionals in health is enough, and there should be frequent meetings. There are some enough data to predict, to prepare, and to prevent for climate change related shocks. This happened also in the aftermath of earthquakes as well, and in the aftermath of so many other kinds of activities, with the ultimate aim of protecting population level uh, of health by increasing health systems capacity to cope, capacity to adapt, and capacity to sustain and strengthen in the wake of a changing climate. This is very high ideal, very difficult to do that, and needs very strong motivation. But I think probably this is what WHO recommends. Continuing with the same, in the next slide, what priority actions we should do to address climate change and mental action. The climate change adaptation refers to various interventions that respond to the effects of climate change by adjusting, by moderating, and coping with the risks and impacts of climate change. Again, by adjusting, moderating, and coping with the risks and impacts of climate change. The adaptation is ultimately affected by the capacity to adapt. How much capacity we have, we all know it, which is the ability. I mean, capacity will depend on the ability and willingness to respond to climate change mediated by individuals and collective agency. It's very important. And another important thing is how much, hope. Next slide, we'll find out that how much motivated we will be, how much active high motivation, or some people say active hope. How much active hope should we have? The key point here is that hope alone, ordinary hope alone, cannot provide sufficient protection from the escalating risks of climate change. This active process occurs when the reality of the problem is acknowledged, as is the magnitude of the problem, intentions to address the problem are set, and engaged actions takes place. Already engaged actions. Uh, Now, then community-based interventions. What community-based interventions we need? We need climate change. We have resilience plans to address the psychosocial well-being of the person. Next one, kindly go to the next one. Kindly go to the next one. Next slide. Next. Next one after that. Yeah, done. Okay. Now, special training for care providers and responders and psychological first aid. This is again, I have probably brought it again. Climate change, community-based should have seminars resilience plans that address psychosocial well-being, and special training for care providers and first responders, and the psychological first aid. Coming towards the end few slides, I found out, if you could go to on the next slide, what are the policy responses, improving access and funding to the mental care. Now, most important things are surveillance and monitoring, administering epidemiological surveys after extreme events, and monitoring emergency department visits during heat waves and following extreme weather events. I've got this from the United States and British health system, eco-friendly health systems of the NSH. And then we need practice, the application of a stepped care approach to mental health that is often used in disaster mental health could help you to support different level of interventions depending on the timings of disasters and the level of distress. This is very important. Time of intervention, what is the level of disaster, and how could we uh, give, if at all possible, evidence-based some interventions to relieve the distress, which is psychiatric intervention and which is psychological interventions together, and the social interventions. So this is kind of, again, public health policy approach. Then preparation and response. Then one thing, resilient planning is in the mental health system. It should be there. I think this is, I don't know if I'm correct or not, because Mia Saab is looking at me with a smile, but this, I think we need to do that. We go for the conclusions, yes. The effects of climate change, uh, ladies and gentlemen, can be direct or indirect, short term or long term, and the acute events can act through mechanisms similar to that of traumatic stress, leading to well understood psychopathological patterns. In addition, the consequences of exposure to extreme or prolonged weather-related events can be delayed, encompassing or covering disorders such as post-traumatic disorder, or even transmitted to later generation. PTSD is very important, again comes out. Now, if you go to the next one, I give you MCQ, 3 seconds for each MCQ. You can look at it. Research has shown that there is causal relationship between heat and depression, anxiety and heat and violence. Now, very clear. I hope you have done it. 1, 2, 3. Next one. उसके बाद, again, next one. We have done that. Yeah. Then the Global Change Impact Studies Center for Pakistan shows that the mean annual temperature has increased in the recent past, with greater increase A, Punjab and Sindh, B, Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 3, Sindh and Balochistan. No, I've told you before that now how much concentration we have. You can go to the next question.
You're so mean.
Then
You can go to bloody any extent. मुझे कहती थी ना, this is bloody projection. मुझे कहती थी अपने मत.
Any distinct changes in measures of climate changes for a period of time can cause physical and mental health issues. Increase, decrease, change. Next one. Last one from 1, 2, 3. And you can take 4 seconds in the last one. The climate change may result from A, natural factors and human activities. B, human activities and building activities. C, Earth's orbit and natural process. Now, this is probably, one more, yeah. If you look at the severe weather changes can lead to hypomania, schizophrenia, and suicidal behavior, and PTSD. Now, I think we had only 5 of them. Let it remain there. I want to acknowledge, ladies and gentlemen, answer key, yes. at the end, I want to acknowledge that these MCQs were largely made by, if you can look at the clinical psychologist, you know, uh, uh, Haista, and then Mumlikat, she was sitting here probably, and the new Zarka, they are helped me, because at times I said, how could I do it, because I'm mm, getting gradually, the 8th century is coming near, so I should be very careful. Thank you very much for careful listening. And then I think there are any questions, I'll try ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a very great presentation, and it has increased in our knowledge a lot. So there are some questions in the chat box.
Yes, from Dr. Amna, kindly change to slide show view. With Dr. Rosina, Assalamu alaikum to all. It's me, Rosina, Dharnawala, clinical psychologist. Eco-anxiety and habitual ecological worrying is increasingly noted in mental health practice. Although there are no official statistics on how many people are affected and what further steps should be taken to have proper data for our research purpose. Yeah, this is the main the main reason for presenting this kind of presentation, which is also, this topic is new for me, very little research, and the statistics are not very much there as far as we are concerned. But I think, again, we need a proper data, we need a questionnaire. Professor Afridi is the Arfan Maula, and he can probably help us a lot. Then we are others. I know if it can be done through a teamwork, which involves all the 4 provinces. And first of all, survey is conducted, and then a bird eye view. And after that, if we find out what this bird eye view is, initial response, then we make a structured interview, which can be taken by psychologists, psychiatrists, and anybody who is adequately trained in their facility vicinity. And I find that the teachers are very good. Professor Afridi told me that he took advantage of teachers in Chatral project as well, along with psychologists, because the teachers in our few surveys, they were not in this related topic, but others, they were very helpful. In Afghanistan too, yes, Afghanistan, we did a PTSD study and they were very helpful. Plus anybody can. So I can tell you, Dr. Rosina, something like that. I hope more is done by you, and I'll learn.
Thank you so much, sir. I would like to end the presentation by the permission of President Psychiatric Society, Professor Dr. Iqbal Afridi.
First of all, sir, we are very thankful to you for choosing this unique topic. I think the climate is related to not only mental health, but all the physical illnesses. And if we look at the man-made disaster in the form of bombing in the Iraq as well as Afghanistan, I think there will be a lot of physical, psychological, and social issues related to climate changes. And we are very thankful to all the participants for their great participation. And according to, let me also tell you that हमने 12,000 पौधे जिना में उगाए हैं, और अब आप लोगों को हम चाहेंगे कि ये तय किया था कि आप लोगों को भी साइकेट्रिक सोसाइटी के मेंबरान को भी भेजेंगे, लेकिन कल जब मैंने मुख्तार साहब से बात हुई तो कह रहे थे मौसम अभी ठीक नहीं है, बाद में भेज देना। तो हमने जो वो बनाई हुई है एक प्लानर और डायरी और चीज़ें वो हम आपको भेजेंगे, और शायद वो प्लांट ना भेज सकें। और इस प्रोग्राम की एक रिवायत है कि हम एक ई सर्टिफिकेट देते हैं एज ए टोकन ऑफ अप्रिसिएशन। So with very clapping for Professor Khalid Mufti for such a unique topic, and we will address all the questions later on. इसको भेज देंगे और वो सर इसके जवाब दे देंगे। हाँ, अब जो है देखिए रिकॉर्ड होगा, नहीं पहले से रिकॉर्ड करेंगे, फिर जो बाकी सवाल आते हैं सर आपको हम भेज देंगे और फिर हम कंपाइल कर देंगे। इसकी आवाज नहीं आ रही, म्यूट कर दें, अनम्यूट कर दें। खालिद साहब कुछ कहना चाहते हैं? मुख्तार साहब आप कुछ कहना चाहते हैं? अनम्यूट कर दें मुख्तार।
Thank you very much, sir. Important topic,
मुख्तार आपकी कनेक्टिविटी इशू है, आपकी आवाज सही से नहीं आ रही।
And thank you very much, Professor.
आवाज में फर्क है, हम बशीर साहब से
time निकाला, and I mean, really, it was very impressive talk. Thank you, sir.
We are very grateful to Professor Farid Minhas and also मोहतरम फरीद साहब कुछ कहना चाहेंगे सर?
ठीक है सर, बस I mean, thank you very much, Professor Khalid Mufti साहब.
Hello.
जी सर, जी सर.
I think it's been a pleasure listening to Mufti Saab's pearls of wisdom about climate change. And I understand that climate change has happened and is happening, and the psychiatric morbidity is changing as the climates are changing. And I was very impressed with Mufti Saab's work that he did in Chitral and the case studies that he has done. He is one of those campaigners who volunteers himself out, whether it is floods or it is terrorism of any kind. And that's what the need of the mental health professionals in this country are. And the way Iqbal Afridi has organized and marshaled the big heads of mental health into academic activities, I think it is formidable, and all credit goes to Iqbal Afridi for doing that. And I think Professor Mufti and people like myself, we would be very happy to continue to contribute towards any of the causes that the young generation of psychiatrists seeks to get the experience of the old generation. And it is always a pleasure to work with the younger colleagues and make them work forward. And my heaviest tributes to Mufti Saab for an excellent presentation. May God bless him and keep him around us for a long period of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bashir साहब कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? अच्छा, अनम्यूट नहीं है, मेरा ख्याल है टाइम पूरा हो गया, हमने भी यहाँ पे आपका अनम्यूट नहीं है माइक, तो लिहाजा हम नहीं सुन पा रहे हैं।
सर आप अपना माइक अनम्यूट कर दें। हाँ भाई।
Was a wonderful presentation. We all learned from it. I personally learned from it. It was a unique topic, and was really impressed with the research work, the impressive statistics that Mufti Saab presented regarding his work in Chatral in Afghanistan. So we all learned from it, and it was a very useful activity organized by PPS. So congratulate all of you.
Professor Mohammad Idris Saab, he's also visible. I think I'll request him to give his comments.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Professor Iqbal, for organizing such a wonderful activity. And Professor Mufti, as usual, hunting very unique and distinct topics. We always knew that ecology or environment affects the human psychology. As Iqbal said, फितरत के मकासिद की करता है निगहबानी या बंदे सहराई या मर्दे कोहिस्तानी. But the way Mufti Saab presented the same, rather verified this notion with the modern statistics is really commendable. I'm particularly impressed with the solutions he proposed, the public health model. I think we need to move forward on that paradigm. And thank you very much, everybody.
No, thank you very much for all the participants, and see you next time with another innovative topic. Thanks a lot. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Ji.